Dr. Sage here, beginning a series of lectures on the protists. And in this first lecture, we're going to have a brief introduction to exactly what are protists. Well, that's difficult to answer. The complexity and diversity of protists makes them difficult to classify. Protists cannot be classified as plants because gametes and zygotes are not protected from drying out. They cannot be classified as fungi because they do not have chitin in their cell wall. They cannot be classified as animals because they do not undergo embryonic development. So they are classified within the domain Eukarya, which means they are eukaryotes, and they're in the kingdom Protista. Now, this can be split into 12 separate kingdoms, but that's now classified as 6 supergroups. However, something to note, you're going to see through this series of lectures, is that we're still trying to define the categories of the protists. So protists are the most diverse eukaryote group in cell structure, ecological niche, nutrition, reproduction, and size. They can be unicellular, where one organism is only one cell big, multicellular, where they can be made up of hundreds of cells, or they can form colonies. They're kind of classified as a miscellaneous group. These don't fit in with the other groups, so we're going to call them protists. The majority are microscopic, unicellular organisms. They live in moist or aquatic environments. For reproduction, it's very common for them to reproduce asexually. However, sexual reproduction might occur when conditions deteriorate. As far as their life cycles are concerned, most are free living, but some are parasitic. Some life cycles may be simple, but many are also extremely complex. And we'll see more details about their life cycles as we go through this series of video lectures. The protists vary in their nutrition mode. So some are kind of fungus-like in that they absorb the nutrients from their environment and they're chemoheterotrophs. Some are animal-like in that they ingest the nutrients from their environment and they're also chemoheterotrophs. And some are plant-like in that they're photoautotrophs. And then you have variations of the above. You have mixotrophs, photoheterotrophs, endosymbiotes, parasites, etc. So a huge range in the way they get their nutrition. They also vary in their cell size and cell number. So a lot of them are microscopic, you need a microscope to be able to see them, and unicellular. So one individual is only one cell big. Whereas some of them are large and multicellular, like the kelps. They're made up of not just one cell, but many cells, and they can grow hundreds of feet long, like 200 feet long as an individual kelp organism. But you also have some that form colonies, and some that are large but unicellular. The protists also vary in how they move. For example, you can have protists that use cilia, which cilia are things that look like short little hairs, but they can have a movement, a wave to them that allow the organisms to, for example, swim through the liquid they're living in. Some form pseudopodia, which means false feet. And so these little projections of their plasma membrane, they can project out and kind of pull themselves like they're crawling along. Some have this long tail called a flagella, which can spin kind of like a propeller and allow the organism to swim through the liquid it's in. Or some might have a couple of flagella, even at perpendicular angles, causing them to spin. Now the protists have an enormous ecological impact. We have photoautotrophs. Remember, those are things like plants are photoautotrophs. They take in energy from sunlight, they take in carbon dioxide, and they use that energy from sunlight and carbon from carbon dioxide to build sugar molecules like glucose. When they do this, they release as a byproduct oxygen. We have protists that do the same thing. They produce oxygen. They also function as producers in both freshwater and saltwater ecosystems, and as they produce the food, the sugar, the glucose for that ecosystem. They're also a major component of plankton, which plankton is organisms that are suspended in the water, and they serve as food for the heterotrophic protists in animals. Many protists are also symbiotes. They can range from strict parasites to mutualism. Coral reefs, for example, are greatly aided by symbiotic photoautotrophic protists in tissue of corals. So in coral reefs, the corals are animals, But living inside those animals, inside the corals, you have photoautotrophic protists, which are benefiting those corals. So, what do we love about protists? Well, virtually all aquatic organisms depend directly or indirectly on protists for food. They also serve as carbon sinks to help to take carbon, for example, carbon dioxide out of our environment. The giant kelps provide homes and microhabitats for a lot of other organisms. And the corals have an ended symbiotic relationship with the dinoflagellates. But why do we hate protists? Well, they can be the cause of human diseases. For example, the disease that causes sleeping sickness. Okay, these are human red blood cells. Okay, and these are a protist that cause human sleeping sickness. Or they can cause malaria. Okay, again, these are human red blood cells. The image is taken differently, but they're red blood cells. And these are the protists that cause malaria. Or the protists that cause potato blight. Or protists that infects like the leaves of grapes, for example. So that was a very brief introduction to exactly what are protists. And the answer is they're ill-defined. Okay, there's many different types of protists. They fall into many different categories. Okay, throughout this series of video lectures, we're going to learn more about the protists. Okay, so we're going to start learning in the next video about how do we classify the protists. What are the different types of protists? Until then, this has been Dr. Sage.